You're listening to Tara Lynn's A Geek Saga podcast. This episode features audio from a discussion panel that was recorded at DragonCon 2019. All right, guys, happy DragonCon Saturday morning. Like just barely still Saturday morning.
You guys are the real heroes.
We're all heroes for being here this early at DragonCon. It's 11:30. It's not that bad. So this panel is Heroic Journeys in Game of Thrones. My name is Tara. I'm going to be the moderator. I am an author, webcaster, podcaster, and I organize Ice and Fire Con, which was the first ever Game of Thrones Song of Ice and Fire convention in the U.S. Andrew, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah. Ice and Fire Con is now in Ohio. Yes.
Yeah.
I heard the where. My name's Andrew Tedeschi. I'm co-host on the Stats Check podcast. I've been going to DragonCon's my 8th year, I think. I'm still a little hungover. And I am on the small council that helps run Ice and Fire Con, and love the high fantasy track.
My name is Trey Cooper. I have a background in some genre literary studies. I'm a huge Martin fan, and unrelated to Martin, but related to literary analysis, I'm a beta reader for Brandon Sanderson.
Nice.
Guest of honor this year.
My name's Chloe. I am a podcaster on Girls Gone Canon. We do literary analysis. We're covering A Song of Ice and Fire POV chapter by POV chapter right now. We also just started covering His Dark Materials, so we're really excited about that. We're powering through before the new series. And I also am one of the Ice and Fire Conners. I help organize the convention with Tara and Andrew.
All right. So the idea for this panel was, to talk about how Martin, and of course it's because the track theme this year is Heroic Journey, so we're going to be talking mostly about how Martin both utilizes and subverts the traditional hero's journey trope. Sorry. There's something in my throat. And to be honest, it's real easy to jump right into this with the very obvious characters. I think probably the first one being Ned. You start reading A Game of Thrones with, Ned as kind of one of the really the main POV person. Even though there's several POVs, of course, he seems to be the most important one. He's the one who knows the most stuff. I put that in quotes. But then, before the end of the book, he is beheaded. So you've lost that connection that you thought was growing, to that character and everything. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I first read Game of Thrones, I didn't believe it. I thought it was a fake out, I ripped through the rest of the book and got to the end and was like, no, he's not really dead, right? I actually had to look it up on Wikipedia. He's assuming he was going to be coming back or something. I was so I was not even worried about spoiling myself because he had to come back, right? You can't kill off your kind of main POV character. But that really was just the beginning. But at the same time, like I said, I think Martin also, he utilizes the trope as much as he subverts it. So, I don't know, what are some characters
I think it's a reinvention of it because, sort of and just to be general and go, the hero's arc, right? You go from the known to the unknown, sometimes of your mentors or guys. You have challenges and there's sort of there's a quintessential challenge where there's usually a death and rebirth. You become something else or become something more, you're transformed, right? So I think part of it, and then you eventually come back home and return to where you started. Sort of, I think LOTR is very straightforward with that, back to the Shire in the end of the book. And I think with Ned, you get to that point where you get to the quintessential challenge where there's supposed to be a transformation, supposed to be, a death and rebirth, and there's just death. But in a way, I think about it okay, how does he live on? How does, Ned's ghost, I think Ned is still present in his children. He's still present in the North. He's still present in all these interactions and how they play out with the Lannisters, the Starks, and even the other parties who know Ned. I think Stannis getting the, hearing, okay, this is from Ned, this has more credibility because it's Ned. This guy doesn't lie. I know he's a straight shooter. So I think, and that drives a lot of the characters. Robb doing what he does, even characters that are subverting him, like Tywin or Roose, they know who he was, they know his weaknesses and the flaws, and they play into that. So. And there are obviously a lot of low-hanging fruits. I mean, I think John is probably the prototypical. I think John's pretty easy. I don't know if you guys want to go into maybe his story a little bit.
Yeah, well, what you're talking about with Ned is interesting because Ned already had that transformation, right? That transformation for Ned when he became the hero was when his sister lay dying in a bed in front of him, begging him to watch after her son. That was his transformation.
That's very true.
That is the transformation for Ned. So he's already been on this hero's journey. And with what Andrew's saying, that a lot of like the Stark children represent, you know, his legacy. They're carrying on this idea of legacy and doing what was right, and that his way was the right way. Someone like Tywin's way, we learned Tywin's way is the wrong way. It's obviously the wrong way. We see his kids and where they are and what they're doing. It's not a good legacy. So John is what carries on Ned. He closes that loop for Ned, right? He keeps that honor, that justice. He carries out that sense of it throughout the books. Even when he's, you know, going to the wildlings, living with the free folk, he thinks like, I'm a turncloak, I'm an oath breaker, like I'm going to be known as a murderer my whole life. And that weight is the same weight that Ned carried. You know, he murdered Arthur Dane. Why? Well, we have kind of a hint of why, obviously, not really printed yet, but we know why.
Yeah, I mean, John is definitely the prototypical. He hits all the beats, call to journey, you know. He leaves to go to the Night's Watch, and then he's challenged at the Night's Watch. He ends up facing trials by going north of the Wall. He wears a false skin. He's tempted by Ygritte, the quintessential temptress.
Red hair and all.
Red hair and all.
Yep.
The whole idea of like resisting the call to action when Robb dies. He wants to bail on being the hero. Mm-hmm. So I mean, he hits all the beats. He is like the model that Martin uses to subvert everyone else, and I just think the fact that all the characters are on like mini hero's journey is in itself a kind of subversion of the whole idea of the hero's journey itself. The model, as Joseph Campbell laid out, you know, was not meant to be multi-POV in a really complicated world. It was stereotypical. It was iconic. It was a single journey for single growth. So.
Well, I mean, and also, like, of course, you get Ned's point of view, you get John's point of view, but there's other characters who, you know, are, I mean, Robb, you know what I mean? Like, I guess by the time Robb becomes kind of clearly important enough to where you're seeing like, oh, he's got his own story. You're obviously not getting his point of view, but at the same time, it's almost like you kind of know that it's not going to last. I would think. Like, after Ned died, I was kind of like, okay, well, anything goes here. And you know, Robb is stepping up, and he's leading the army, and he's winning everything. There's no way this is going to last, and that's sort of like, it's one of the more just blatantly obvious, characters where Martin like puts Robb out there, and like, you know, it's going to end, like, you know, this isn't going to last. But I mean, then like later he brings in like Quentin, you know, who also kind of has that same sort of nothing goes right for him, but you know,
except for taming the dragon in the end.
That went really well.
And George is like, it's not even that he's subverting these things, it's he's redefining what a hero is. What makes an honorable man, what truly is just and righteous. You have Stannis, who is a righteous and just man. He's not a great dad or a great buddy. Like, you probably wouldn't want to go hang out on Sundays for church with him, right? But he is righteous and just. Like, he's living by an ethical, moral code. But does that make him a hero necessarily? You look at Quentin shows up in the books and he thinks he's the hero. Same with Aegon, the next Aegon to take the throne possibly. They think they're the heroes of the story, but they're not. So you have this representation of what their motives are, why they're doing them, then you say, is that truly what's heroic to the main story of the book? And he redefines those heroes. You meet, even through Arya, who is a child of war. She's going through, and she is going to have some post-traumatic stress very badly in the end of the story, like very obviously, but she's seeing horrific things and trying to be as ethically just and moral as she can in the face of them. So it's really how they treat other humans, what their journey is about, and is it actually a worthwhile cause to the narrative?
I mean, I agree. I think Martin sprinkles all the characters that have any major beats in the story. He sets up to have proto hero journeys, and I think in a way he's using that as a misdirect he's subverting the tropes to say, who do you think is really the hero? And you know, like the obvious answer is Dany and Jon and Tyrion. They have the clearest ones, but you know, every single person, you know, has their call to action. Arya, Sansa in King's Landing, everyone, and you got to kind of analyze it and say, are they going to be the ones that go forward, and are they going to be the ones that just die?
And there's a matter of perspective there too, right? Because when you're looking at it from their perspective, you can see that model, fit in that model, and you're identifying with that model. You're identifying with those characters, with Dany when she's going through all these struggles. You're identifying with Jon. You know, so ultimately, some of these characters like Quentin, you see him burn out pretty quick. But I think with Dany and Jon, there's more of a slow burn, if you will, no pun intended. But rip King's Landing. But you know, it's still playing out in terms of the perspective, in terms of the Martinian way of subverting the trope over the long scale. And by the way, just as a note, if anybody wants to make any comments, I don't know if
yeah, please just
pop
raise your
hand
hand
up,
yeah.
and we'll just go. Yeah, there's one in the back.
I didn't think about it before, but isn't the Game of Thrones novel basically Star Wars if you had just followed Obi-Wan the entire movie instead of Luke Skywalker?
Well, I mean, and feel free to comment on this because you've probably read much more than I have, but I think it's a pretty, you know, in general, the hero's journey is a trope that, you know, we identify with in storytelling, you know, so it's if you look through those arcs and you break them down in their quintessential elements, you can start lining them up. So I could imagine if you really broke it down, you'd be able to line it up with Star Wars. I'm sure I could do that, like, with, I don't know, an hour and like some Jack Daniels and like figure that out.
So a little background for Hero Journey people. George Lucas like directly used Joseph Campbell to write Star Wars, but before that, Joseph Campbell, the whole kind of study of mythology and folklore was by and large a kind of sociological anthropological study, and so in the early days, you had scholars. Claude Lévi-Strauss, who formed a movement called structuralism, where he traveled in South America and made these myth themes, these movements, and from there was a Russian folklorist named Vladimir Promp who developed formalism, which was an offshoot of structuralism, and Claude Lévi-Strauss by and large hated him, and he actually devised 31 movements, and it was all very no give. There is, you know, part 1, and then you have subsections A, B, C, D, E, and F, and it's either part 1A, part 1B, part 1C. I actually had the opportunity to take Vladimir Prompt's code and encode A New Hope, and it's about it was about a line of text about that long, of letters with subscripts and superscripts. But from that, we get Sir James George Frazer, who wrote the Golden Bough. Which was kind of trying to describe how myth influences culture. And so from there we get to Joseph Campbell. And so there's this huge litany of people that Joseph Campbell is standing upon to produce this. And I don't know about matching Obi-Wan with Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones is a lot more sophisticated than A New Hope, as much as I love A New Hope. But the elements are going to translate somehow.
Well, I mean, and let's be real, like all literature, all like creation when it comes to writing things, like whether it's movies, TV, whatever, it's pretty much almost all derivative these days. Like it's hard to, I don't even know if it's possible to be absolutely, completely
original.
Yeah, original.
It's storytelling. It's classic storytelling. It's what we've done with literature and storytelling. That, I mean, it starts at the most basic level. You have a character. Your character has a want. Your character goes through trials to get toward the want. They hit a climax. Before the climax, your character's downtrodden. Like, something's got to happen. The climax happens. Things turn around. The hero wins. Yay. That's a classic. Boom, boom, boom. That's a story.
Act 1, Act 2.
Yep.
I mean, and like the whole idea of the hero's journey was to develop, to explain humanity's motivations.
There's
The heart in conflict with itself.
Right.
Yeah.
There's this like collective subconscious that explains why we do the things we do, and that the hero's journey illustrates that.
Yes.
Well, I mean, and again, like I think if we'd done this panel last year, I think there would be different things to talk about or
The
not
last
talk
season
about.
doesn't exist.
Yeah, right.
Season 8 was better than season 4. It's been bad the whole time.
I don't know what happens after the
Come
last
back
book.
at 7 p.m. to hear us talk about those things. But no, for real though, like we all know that Martin is not going to write us a happy ending. And we know that we're going to lose a lot of these characters. And, like you mentioned Arya earlier, like everybody loves Arya. I get it. But Arya is a very, very troubled little girl. And she's not going to have a happy ending. She's not going to have a true hero's journey. I don't think in the end she's going to sail away into the West and
The
just...
west of Westeros.
Yeah, like I don't think that's going to be her end all and be all, is that she just sails away and gets to live happily ever after as a Western pirate or
I don't know if it
whatever.
would be sailing away to live happily ever after, though. It's basically like
Running from
it's
the faceless
opposite-
men, right? I
well,
mean-
no, it's what Sandor just did. He dies, he goes and gets to have his time to repent, reflect, and shut up for vows of silence and dig graves and do his penance. And she's gonna see some stuff. And even in season 8 with that stupid white horse, it symbolized her choosing life.
That
right?
was
Like-
5 minutes. 5 minutes of the last season.
But that was her choosing life. That was the point. It was her choosing life. Barrick tells her to live. Sandor tells her to live. She stops murdering people and stops going for vengeance and learns that's not the right way and gets back on her path. So it's like peace for her, and that'd be nice because I just thought she was gonna die. I'm like, all right, sure.
Oh, I mean, didn't
And her dog's
George's
name is Nymeria, so
George's wife told him like
Yeah, she'd kill
he's not allowed to kill Arya, so I'm pretty sure Arya is safe.
yeah.
But she really did go on the journey, right? I mean, she had
Yes.
like,
Yes, she has
was
her
happy
arc.
with,
Yes.
She
and
lost her
she
identity.
faced up too many trials, right? And ended up back home.
I mean, she
in the
definitely
show.
And she had several mentors.
she had definitely had the mentors. She definitely received magical boons.
And
Yep.
she was transformed
You
when
know,
she came home.
And she had to confront her past, just like everyone else.
Yeah.
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 I mean, she's gonna have that pileup of trauma.
I mean, she definitely has
She had to give up her identity.
a
Yeah.
very, she has a
Yes.
very, she's very closely aligned with the standard beats of the hero's journey.
And of course, again, we don't really know how her story is going.
Yeah, her dog's just named after a queen that sailed west. And, like,
Yeah.
Keep it
Not to
yourself.
mention
That's
what-
Looney Theories later.
Not to mention what Blood and Fire has someone that sails all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
So-
Alyssa Farman.
I did want to make a point, because this might not come up through natural conversation, that Sir James George Fraser, The Golden Bough, he tried to explain how society evolved. And his MO was that you start with the magical past and you develop into the religious controlling understanding of the world, and from there you get to science. And that's the natural progression of cultural evolution. And we see that in Martin, and it is subverted because we see that the Targaryens, the Valyrians, they had this magical past. And a case could be made, that the Church of the Seven becomes the explanation, even as the Maesters are kind of causing the magic to go away.
Yeah.
But the North remembers the magic. So they're still seen as a little primitive because their religion is closer to magic than it is to like the organized kind of septon driven seven religion. But at the same time we see magic cycling back around, which is not part of James George Fraser's evolution, because in our humanity we reach enlightenment and we don't go back to magic.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a subversion of something that Campbell built his work on, but wasn't necessarily explicitly talked about by Campbell.
Yes, we have a question over here.
So, as much as I don't want to derail you,
Is that mic even on?
no, it's not even on.
No, you got it.
But anyway,
There you go.
focusing on characters is interesting in and of itself, but may I posit that Martin is actually giving the hero's journey for the houses, that the House Stark is going through this entire transformation. So you got to like dial it back and lose focus a little bit and maybe see it from that angle.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's one thing that's beautiful about Game of Thrones, and especially nowadays when you have so much prequel stuff. You've got the Dunk and the Egg novellas, you got World of Ice and Fire, we're going to have more prequel stuff. So you're able to go back and see the genesis of a lot of these houses, how they started way back when, some of which were like given land earlier during the Dunk and Egg novellas or become major houses at that point. And then you see them go through and it come full circle. one thing, if you look through World of Ice and Fire, you'll see the same names reoccur over and over again. That is not a mistake, and you do see similarities and contrasts. Obviously, one of the more funny ones, I think, is Sam the Savage. One of the best warriors back in the day, of course, juxtaposed completely against our Samwell Tarly we all know and love. But, it shows that these houses are on these arcs that need to play out, and they have a story within themselves. Some of them, however, will be subverted and will end up dying off. You have now houses that have come full circle and died off and will die off.
And I also feel like the house journey is very there is parity and like similarity. So you have the Targaryens that are nearly wiped out, go out into exile. The same thing is happening to the Starks in the books as process. If you don't think about the show, that journey has begun for the Starks, where they are being destroyed and being driven into exile. And so you see these houses follow the same set of patterns and routines.
Yeah, that's like the biggest part of Northern independence too for House Stark. I mean, that's why it's so important. I mean, before the Targaryens even landed, they've been free for so many years, and they did the right thing, which is when you bled yourself dry in a war, you take the knee, you say, "I protect my people." You don't see that, obviously. You think of the Dance of the Dragons. Well, they did not exactly think of their feudalism and their contract that they signed with the small folk. So House Stark, the North has mostly always remembered. They've always done those things. They've always taken care of their people, and now they're being beat down by the throne. I mean, Sansa Stark bleeds in front of the Iron Throne for Northern independence. She gets beat by grown men with chainmailed hands, and swords. Like, that's not what you do with a highborn hostage, necessarily. Doesn't look good. And then the North's armies are bled, and then the Red Wedding, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. So House Stark's progression as that hero, they have to hit their transformation. So it is on a whole, and it is that individualistic style of point of view chapters that something George does particularly well. He puts his own spin on doing it from their point of view and giving you just the information you need to know.
And on the same level, the Targaryen has just experienced death and rebirth and is heading towards apotheosis with Dany and the dragons. Have the same, as far as I know, the same three colors as originally Aegon the Conqueror. I think the dragons are the exact same three colors, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
Well, I mean, and Chloe, you mentioned Sansa. I think she's kind of a good example of, like, I think a lot of people don't really think of her as like as being part of like that heroic journey sort of tale, but she really does, have her. I feel like the general consensus now is a lot more positive towards Sansa than it was like 5 or 6 years ago in fandom, but she really does have. She has her own like story, and she is her own hero. Really, she ends up having to be.
It's just difficult thinking of villains as mentors, right? I mean, because her mentors are Cersei and Littlefinger, right? So I mean, you're not thinking of those as the spiritual guides you necessarily want, but that's what you get, and she learns from them and grows and is transformed by them.
Yeah, and those are her tribulations.
And their tool set is very valuable in the world that's left post Stark. I mean,
and they need somebody in that family with that tool set. Clearly, in their like skills gap analysis.
Right.
That is a giant gaping hole.
They each play that role, right? They each have their own role that adds to the family's hero's journey. Not all of them are succinct to everything. Obviously, Sansa herself knows she couldn't wield a sword well or fight like Arya or Jon does, but Sansa is the political one. She's the one that pays attention to those threats, the mind threats.
And you need that. You need complementary skills. Like that's, it doesn't need to be one hero to rule them all. I mean, you can have that family dynamic, and I think showing that is something that's different about Game of Thrones is that you see specialization of skills, which you just don't see in other circumstances. And when you get into POV chapters, you see how people are thinking. The fighters are really thinking about fighting technique and what's going on. Davos, that man knows more about ships than anybody else, right?
But nothing about fighting.
Exactly.
Or politics, really.
Exactly.
Yes.
So,
But that was Sansa's original wish, right? Was to be queen, and then by the end of this television series, right? Then she's queen.
Well,
we're not getting into Looney
That is one of the few things from this television show that I swear to God it will happen. Like
I've been swearing for like 7-8 years on it.
Oh no, Sansa Queen in the North, like absolutely. I think that's always been like
because it's a change from her original want. So in the 1993 outline letter George sent, Sansa originally was going to rue her mistake, but she was going to choose Joffrey over her family, which we see that on a smaller level, but George has obviously changed what he wanted to do because in that 93 outline, Sansa has his baby, she just stays there. That's just what she does. She just stays with Joffrey until his death, and she has the baby and just ruse it, and that's it. And now she became this complex character that ends up stuck with the people that have doomed her family and having to learn these awful lessons and survive in a snake pit, And she's a 12-year-old girl for most of it. That's the thing that we don't think of. The TV show aged them up, and George regrets kind of not having them start off that age, but a lot of these lessons change how you view everything when you think how young Arya and Sansa and Bran are and everything that they're going through. It's really intense.
And that brings a good point. We haven't talked about Bran at all. And
I have a whole page of notes if you want me to start.
Go ahead.
Chloe.
I was trying to avoid this discussion, but
have someone in the
can we
back,
get
actually.
Okay. We'll get the back before you
Yeah,
get to
yeah.
TLDR.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I feel like the hero's journey to arc for all the characters is kind of applied for everybody. Like you said before,
Yes.
it's more like Martin showing what the characters that fail. It's like, this is what you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Or this is what happens when the hero's journey gets corrupted by when your mentors are Littlefinger and Cersei.
Right.
Or stuff like that. Where the person that actually does come full circle is Jon.
Yeah, and I think it's a big thing with perspective, right? In a lot of people's perspective, they are the hero.
Yeah.
However, as the reader, we have that omniscient view where we can see it all and say, no, Quentin, you are not the hero, buddy.
All they needed was a cell phone.
How many times it would solve things in Game of Thrones? Honestly, Lyanna Stark. A lot of people are unhappy with how Game of Thrones ended their season, and I am too, because they haven't written for 4 years. But it's fine, it's life, it's a TV show, it's flashy, we got dragons, I'm happy about that. But the thing that was the worst part was the biggest hero's journey, the last hero, basically, from the story. Old Nan has this great conversation with Bran, where she tells him, yada yada, last hero, his dog dies, his friends died, his sword breaks, he's in the heart of winter. And that's basically what Bran goes and does, right? And the show kind of took him out for an entire season, but that helped the ending. And I'm not salty about it. But George puts this spin on some of these heroes with this romantic Arthurian twist, right? And many people have written, even before the show finished off, they've written these ideas of the Fisher King and Bran as the kind of Arthurian and Fisher King character, the Broken King. Bran the Broken, Bran the Blessed, and you have all these characters in the story like Bran the Builder, and Bran is kind of the most pure of the characters. He has some impure, I want to warg into Hodor and hang out with Mira thoughts, which is kind of like, Bran, you sit down. Don't
Well,
do that, man. Leave Hodor down. Leave him alone.
Sit down.
It's kind of gross. Don't do it. It's against his will. It's just not nice. Let Hodor go take a nap. But Bran becomes this Broken King. He is the Good Lord. He's the last Stark in Winterfell before Winterfell gets taken down. He was learning to be a lordling. He knows all of his histories. He is going to be able to manipulate events, possibly, via Bloodraven and his teachings, and at least see things and help change the future and see the future and help them survive. So his survivalism is really important. It's just they forgot to write it, for a year or two. They kind of just forgot to write it.
And I think the more you read about Bloodraven and what he was able to do in the histories, you look back on that and you see, okay, he's going to be really effective if he's using the same tactics as Bloodraven, or even better, powered up. So I think we had a question for you.
Sort of a follow up on that. Just one thing I liked about one thing I thought about Bran, I should say. Once he sort of gained all the knowledge of everybody, the show seemed to want to make him more distant and more removed.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly because the writers just didn't like Bran very much. But and that's the thing, you see the cold, dispassionate intellectual, but I think they've done studies where people who are smarter generally also tend to be nicer.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see that in Bran, rather than have him become more removed and distant. He actually becomes more compassionate and a better ruler. I hope that's the way they're going to go with that.
Because we left off with that, right? That's in Winterfell. There's that really cute feast at the Harvest Feast where he sends down sweets for no reason to Old Man and Hodor and everyone and all of his buddies at court. He's just give them a really good size of pie. I love them. Just cause. What a good boy.
I mean,
And
he's a kid.
I think part of that is just how they write for TV versus how you can write it. And I will definitely talk about that later when we're talking about the season. But I think when you're trying to make it a twist, you throw that.
Oh,
in.
twist.
It's supposed to be edgy.
Yeah. I do think that he has the most emblematic mentor and magical boon.
Mm-hmm.
So with Jon, with mentor we see Gior and Longclaw is his magical boon. With Daenerys, her magical boon is the dragons, and but Bran has Bloodraven, and he has magical warg and green seer and all the other powers that he gets.
Well, I mean, I think that, your mention of the whole, like, the learning of like compassion and like and kind of carrying that on, like Bran knowing everything, knowing all of the history and all of the stories. I can't, like, I you'd imagine that knowing all of that, even if you as a person are, I mean, all people are slightly corrupt, let's be real. But even if you as a person are slightly corrupt, like knowing all of that history and everything, it just gives you that extra push, that extra drive to make things better.
Right. It works against your self-interest, right? I mean, because, it's essentially just self-interest gone with zero checks. And I think Bran can see, like you said, history and incidences where this just went completely off the rails because of these people. I mean, you have a history of Targaryen kings, and you can see the genius and you can see the madness. Mm-hmm. And I think he's got all that.
Well, and the good ones die. I mean, you look at Egg, who started giving, Aegon V started giving all these like really good things and credits towards the small folk and starting to bring more equal laws into place. And we don't hear about that really a lot as far as those kind of feudal laws being changed now, obviously, in the story. I think they kind of made that joke, but they made it into a joke about the whole democracy, but I do think they'll come closer to something like that in the endgame. That's one thing I think maybe they simplified a little bit. I think the kingdoms are going to kind of go down on a lower level, minimize the government a little bit more, and have it be more involved with the local authority. I mean, the whole point of the whole story is just like the small folks suffer while they play their Game of Thrones. It's just this select, there's 600,000 registered celebrities on Wikipedia. That's what they have in Westeros, that's it. That's the nobles, that's the high, and everything else is just ants to them. Mm-hmm. I mean, and there's multiples of their ants. They don't.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, how many they
don't give a crap.
every time they go to battle, they're talking about tens of thousands of troops, and you don't know who any of these people are. I mean, there's not how many great houses are there?
Right.
How many minor houses are there? The absolute total number is it's in the dozens / maybe low hundreds.
And I think, was it Septon Maribald that had the speech about war and talking about people fighting for people they don't even know, and a lord takes over the lands, and now they're suddenly fighting for him, and these guys don't really have real armor on. They're not knights. They've got a piece of leather and an axe they used to use for cutting wood, and they're sent out there to get run down by a horse. Kind of sucks for the small folk.
I mean, and honestly, they're the real heroes, and we don't. What's sad is that I think that's maybe my one gripe with the Song of Ice and Fire novels is that we never really we don't get a small folk point of view. We get some
Davos is the closest.
Davos is the closest, and we get some epilogue and prologue POVs that are kind of close to that level, but we don't get any.
The closest you get is Arya, Brienne, and Davos.
Yeah,
it's the closest to the ground you get on it.
But I mean, Arya, not because she is a small folk,
she's there.
She's there. Yeah, that's
yeah.
I would say early John actually has some roots in that too, with the kind of bastardization, his feeling like he's not part of the house.
Yeah.
And living with, convicted criminals at Castle Black.
Yeah. Exactly. So
he's in prison pretty much.
I mean, I definitely feel like Act 1, he is that on the ground commoner
He lived in Winterfell. He's alright.
Yeah, he also
socially abused, but I'm just saying he did have.
I mean, if you're going to include, I'm just saying if you're going to include Arya.
No, I was saying because she talks to small folk.
Yeah.
Often. Yeah, John a little bit, but then he also gets told by Donald Noy, and Donald Noy's like, you had food every day, son. You had big, beautiful leathers. You had a sword training lesson every day. These boys have never had that, ever. They got sent to jail because they stole some bread for their family, or they raped someone, or they were this or that, and it's awful, but it's you're in a penal colony. You chose to be here. They did not.
And that's still one of the few perspectives we get that. It's just, if you look at most of the POVs, the majority of the POVs do not even think about that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't even cross their mind.
Never.
Yeah.
Cersei would never think about it.
No, never. No.
I think she said she hates the people.
Yeah.
Yeah, kill all of the scum,
Yeah.
Yeah, Cersei.
I mean, Joffrey is born of that same attitude.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, the riot is, again, there you go, that riot is just horrendous.
Yeah.
Anybody? I just want to make sure we don't have.
We can talk about Joffrey's hero's journey.
Nope, that's okay.
I mean, Joffrey's, just a
Theon definitely does have one. Theon for sure. I mean, we're waiting. In the books, it still is a longer burn once again to see that redemptive arc and his atonement. I think that's a big part, and I think you see that definitely in Theon, and we're going to see that in Jaime. Jaime's definitely one of my favorite characters. It's one of the reasons why I got really into Game of Thrones from the books. The book perspective.
Well, I mean, with Jaime, it's like you start off, you're supposed to hate him. You're not supposed to believe that he has any sort of redemption arc or hero's journey. And honestly, like, again,
subvertive.
We're going to ignore everything the show does with Jaime, because, like, just ignoring this right now. But he really does have, like him, and one, Theon, it's like, you don't necessarily dislike Theon in the beginning. Like, it's not until Clash of Kings when he, takes over Winterfell and
He's
everything.
just trying to get his spear wet.
But even then, there's a good amount of time where you don't, Theon's just kind of like a side character, and then all of a sudden he becomes a bad guy. But, and then, of course, you don't, thank God, you don't have to read his torture like you had to see it in the show.
Yeah. I think Theon's torture is his form of death. And when he emerges, it's his rebirth.
Yeah, Reek was just, that's the lowest of the low a human can go.
Right, exactly. And
him.
And I think Jaime's time with with House Bolton and all of their cronies,
the brave companions,
exactly, the brave companions. I think that's his death, getting his hand cut off.
Oh, absolutely.
That is the death of Jaime Lannister.
He is the death of his dreams.
He is never Jaime Lannister after that.
No,
and so they definitely are hitting those beats.
He was never, the only thing he cared about, the only escape he had was being a knight and fighting.
I'm one of the top 3 swordsmen.
Yeah, that was it. That was what he could hang on to. And, his time with Brienne obviously really filled that handshake hole, I guess, and, filled that gap in that... Okay, let's not take that out of context, guys. Listen, Brainies, I hear you. No, but that she filled that gap and kind of helped him to be a better man and to find, inside of him what he could actually do, his aptitude.
Yeah. And again,
that's sort of a coming together of an arc there from Dunk and Egg, of those two families coming back together in those two characters reuniting.
Yeah.
Talking about house arcs.
Yeah, they're also first cousins technically then, right, or something, or second cousins then.
There's a cousin relationship.
Isn't there a cousin relationship there now?
It's okay. It's definitely okay.
It's Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
So
if it's okay.
They're all related.
Yeah. It's how much Irish do you not want to be, right? What percentage is it? I don't know. It's high though.
Yeah. This is a little bit off topic, but it's like going back to our U.S. history.
Yeah.
If your family colonized New England, and your friend's family colonized New England, guaranteed you're related 6 ways from Sunday.
Yeah.
So, and again, that goes back to the whole there's only so many great houses, minor houses, whatever.
Right.
So they're all intermarried and
And Martin modeled after the real world. The War of the Roses and all of the intermixing between the French and the English, and they were all definitely married.
And the marriages were all political, strategic. Once again, you either had to ferment an alliance outside of your region because you're trying to have some sort of conquest or expand your territory, or within your region to deal with unrest, prevent rebellions, keep the people within the region satisfied.
And plus, there's that notion of nobility rule and commoners don't, and nobility shouldn't, marry with commoners because it dilutes the nobility's mandate to rule.
And then you look at those things like Jenny and Duff of Old Stones, and you see all the Targaryen kind of mishaps in Egg's reign of what went wrong, and he had so many great laws for the small folk and so many good things in store, and then, prophecy happened. It's just not good. You see those kind of failings. And for the small folk, it makes me think of the storming of the dragon pit that George put in Fire and Blood, which during Dance of the Dragon End times, basically, that the small folk rose up and they killed a lot of dragons. They just hacked at them, murdered them, awful, just bloody death. And people always say Aegon III was Dragon's Bane. He's the reason the dragons died. But the dragons died directly because the Dance of the Dragons, because they wouldn't set aside their pride and figure something out. And they just decided to tase out the land with just fire and just kill each other. And bloody wars like that, it's these are the rulers they don't want anymore. So the heroes that we're seeing in the story, like Sansa and Bran, that actually have the like-minded end game of, okay, well, you guys need to be safe and maybe not die in the winter or die by war. We get that. That's kind of what I think the end game is going towards, at least, that we're just going to make the small folk have a day.
Well, and I
have
think
the requisite number of brothels, of course.
Thanks, Braun. Well, I mean, I think like also that brings up the point of like the characters who, like Sansa and Bran and Jon, they care about the. I mean, we'll call them small folk. You know what I mean? Like Sansa, she sings the mother's hymn to when they're like all hiding in Maegor's Keep.
I mean, make no mistake, very much so, still privileged and highborn, and she doesn't
Absolutely.
get much on the ground, but she does think of the small folk, and she tries to put on a brave face because she's standing in that light of Cersei. The like Nega Sansa standing there just like jaded, just being like, I'm drunk and they're all gonna die anyway, and Sansa's just like, okay, I have to be really brave for them because she kind of sucks.
Well, I mean, and like she also just I mean, and not just Sansa. Again, like you mentioned Bran earlier, like sending sweets down to his people. Really, they're his people, and Jon, going so far out of his way to help the wildlings and everything. Like, I mean, shoot, even we haven't talked about Dany yet. I feel like we're all kind of avoiding it.
Like, when does the hero not become the hero?
Exactly. I mean, really, because like,
when does it change?
You see it.
Well, she's in the books. She's still there, caring about the small folk and caring about her people.
Yeah,
caring about her people. Yeah.
But you still, I mean, this is one thing. Like, while I completely agree that this show like trashed her character arc at the end, like you do see the hints of what's to come. I mean, and you see it in the books too when she crucifies the masters and everything. Like, hints.
Yeah, but foreshadowing isn't character development.
No.
Right, of course. Oh, exactly. Trust me. I got you. I got you, fam. I got you, fam.
Well, but you see, like, when it does turn, I mean, the end, the vision when she's, dying in the Dothraki Sea, she's like, wow, I have a stomach bug. She's, like, laying out there, and Quaithe comes to her in the stars, is like, remember who you are. Like, she tells her, she does the Mufasa thing, right? She shows up, she's like, you're a dragon, Daenerys. And, I mean, she's not going to Vaes Dothrak for a vacation, and she's gonna have to burn her way back to Westeros. She has Illyrio to deal with when she finds out that Aegon is being propped up, and that's what the show was missing. And that is what is going to be her misstep. Aegon is going to throw her off her game. The second Dance of the Dragons is going to affect her. I mean, that's why George expanded so much in Fire and Blood on Rhaenyra, to give you kind of that really, really gray morality, because everybody in history says, oh, Rhaenyra is the worst, but how many other Targaryen men were far worse than what she did? She just fought for her birthright, and Dany's a conqueror, and she's coming to fight for her birthright.
Well, yeah, men and women. I mean, clearly the Dance with Dragons was a conflict of personalities with two very strong female personalities there that were in conflict. But I think you definitely see in like Maegor a reflection in what can happen when you flip on that other side and you when that switch flips on. Because I'm sure that if we got a POV from Maegor, he would ultimately think he was the hero. He would think, hey, I went out there and I fought on that hill. I fought against 7 people. I came up triumphant even though I got hit on the head. I mean, and constantly he prevails and prevails and prevails. So I think you go back to perspective. You think from your perspective you are the hero. And then Martin comes and subverts that by showing us all the perspectives and saying, no, absolutely not. Sorry, Dany, you ultimately are not the hero of this.
But I mean, and her vision was good, but it's like the Pawnee merger and Eagleton merger in Hearthstone. You can't just do it overnight. That's not how it works. Did you know that I'm a luminary in the Song of Ice and Fire community?
Oh, God.
No, you can't just do it overnight, though. That's not how it works, and Dany's learning that, and she's going to keep learning it, and she did have the vision. She wanted people to be free. And what happens when you cross that line? Where does that switch go? And I think she's going to be driven into it by these kind of birthright issues. And when she later finds out that her recent ally, Jon Snow, ally in the sheets and the streets, when she finds out that he's a Targaryen too, she's going to be like, I just dealt with this, dude! I thought I was good! It's not going to be good. It's not going to be good for her.
Yeah, it's because the order of operation is there. She finds out about Fagon and then finds about Jon.
Yeah.
Clearly that's going to come out first, especially since he's already back.
And you'd think that she'd be like, yay, I have family.
And of course, Fagon thinks he's actually a hero as well. He's got Blackfire, he's coming back, He
has everything. She doesn't. He has all. The only thing he's missing is the dragons.
Yeah.
That's it.
I mean, and how long will that necessarily ring true? Like, will one of the dragons end up
there or dead
or with
attached to him?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Also, I mean, that's side note. just like postscript over here, like John in the show where he just like walked up. She's like, yeah, just ride this dragon. Like, how did you not know he's a Targaryen and you're just letting him ride your dragon? Just get on that dragon, boy.
5 seasons ago, my dreams come true. I'm special. Yeah, John, get on the dragon. Enjoy, buddy. Maybe he'll fall off. Maybe she knew.
Yes, go ahead.
I hate to use the term the true hero's journey of the true hero for the stories, but it's
Right, yeah.
a lot of it is like the journey they take and the choices they make on the journey. The ones that kind of fail or aren't the true heroes are the ones that are by any means necessary to get to the end. Like the ends justify the means. Where the ones that are the better characters or like that care about the small folk are the ones that care about the means as well, and not just the ends. Where Danny starts to edge towards the ends justify the means toward the end of even where we're at in the books and a little quickly in the TV show too. But I think that's where the difference between all the characters come in, where you get the true hero's journey and the corrupted or half-ended hero's journey.
Right, you see a dichotomy there, right? And obviously there's a short burn and a quick burn. In the short term, obviously the people that are ends justify the means are going to triumph, right? And that's why Ned fails, because those folks just have it. But when you're setting up a reputation, like what Walder Frey has done for himself, he's put himself in a spot. I mean, nobody's going to trust that guy again. I mean, literally, when your sigil is double crossings, I mean, that's problematic. So,
and you think about Ned, and Ned died for our sins, obviously, right? Like, he's the death, the sacrifice of the story so that the story can actually go on, because he has all the answers. You don't want to learn, you'll learn R plus L equals J, you'll learn John's parentage. Yes. After you read it a bajillion times, you're on fan forums, obviously, but the first time you read it, Ned dies, you're like, now I'll never know the mysteries that are going on, and that's the point. And it's interesting because characters like Stannis are just the mini arc for Dany, right? Stannis is proto Dany. Stannis is righteous and just, and he does things that you might not be comfortable with, but he still is a just ruler, and Dany's going to take that similar arc because the real Song of Ice and Fire, besides the friends we made along the way, that's the real Song of Ice and Fire, but ice preserves and fire consumes. That's what the story's telling us. Dany chooses fire, Stannis chooses fire. You have characters like John, that John will likely choose his ice side. He will probably be more loyal to the Starks than he would be to a family he never knew in the end. He'll be more loyal to Ned, to his legacy, and that's what...
I don't even think it's loyalty necessarily. It's literally just that is what he knows, that is who he is. Yeah. Yes. I mean, you can as people, we all grow and change throughout our life, but there's definitely I think there's definitely things we learn and that are instilled in us when we're young that that's never going to go away.
That code of ethics and morality.
Yeah.
But it can change and be altered and updated, and I think that's what you see in all the characters. Are transformed to update, use that framework, that operating system, but install some better applications that allow them to get the task done.
Andrew, people aren't computers.
Let's talk about robots, guys.
And to go back to Ned for a second, I think that's kind of where he fell off. There was that moment everyone talks about when Renly comes to him and says, "Hey, look, let's just do this right now," and Ned won't do it. And I think that was where he should have changed a little bit, and he didn't, and that's where he goes down.
I mean, I'll be real. I mean, Ned was not wrong in that situation.
But once again, he'd already gone through his arc. He'd gone through his transformation. Yeah. He's post transformation. So to him, he's saying, "I've got all the skills I need because I made it that far." Yeah. It's part of saying, and I think that one of the things you can do in life is say, "Look, this is a constant journey." It doesn't need to be a circle that ends, but a circle that can begin again, and you can learn, adapt, transform. Learn, adapt, transform. In life, when you stop doing that, you stop growing and adapting, and you're going to become bent by certain forces that have changed when you failed to change.
Yeah, you lose your page time, basically, is what he's saying. And on top of that, Ned's whole arc in the first book is save the children. Right, he sees the flashes of the Targaryen children wrapped in red wrappings so that their blood doesn't show. That's what the Lannisters delivered them to the bottom of the throne. He sees the slaughter, and he remembers the sack of King's Landing. He saw all of the war and that firsthand. He walked. When you see Jon in season 8 walk King's Landing in the ruins, obviously the cinematography was off the chain this season. I'll give them that. They obviously put all that money and focus into that. But that's what Ned saw, right? Those are when he watches Arya fighting and like learning to water dance with cereal. He sees Liana in his head dead in her bed of blood. He sees his children and his family and all these other children dead from the rebellion and the war. And that's what carries through the story. Ned allows Daenerys Targaryen to live, and he, begs like, no, don't go kill her, Robert. Like, please don't do this. Let her live out and see how she becomes. And the story allows these characters to live their arc and see how they become in the way. And Ned Stark's kids go a certain way because they're instilled with those things, and you see that they carry on his sacrifice and death through the story.
Well, I mean, and we touched on Stannis a little bit, and I kind of want to go back to that because Stannis is because he's like the kind of like the antithesis to the hero's journey. Like, I mean, yeah, like he does he have what is his magical boon? I guess it's Melisandre, but like he doesn't like.
He's got a flaming sword.
Justice is
that is not magic.
He's consumed by that prophecy and fire as well, right? Like he has been told, so he lived his whole life dying for Robert out in war and starving and thinking like I'm not good enough and I should have been and I did all these things for you and I'm the middle child and like obviously we get it, Stannis, you're the middle child. He had to bear all that weight when Robert was off kanging and feasting. He had to help raise Renly or look after him and do this.
He did a good job. And he did a good job at those things. I mean,
don't get me wrong. I love Stannis, but
he's owed for these things.
Yes,
he feels that he's owed this. This is his right, and he's owed it. Robert gave him Dragonstone. It was an insult when it's like that's technically the heir status. So shut up, Stannis. God, I know it's grim, but just get like I don't know, a dehumidifier. But like he grows up thinking like I am the rightful king now that my brother's dead and his kids are born of incest, and he does have a better policy than most of the candidates, right? We can at least put that down, besides the burnings. But he's been told suddenly, she comes to him, Melisandre comes to him and says, hey, you're special. That's all he's ever wanted to hear in his life. That, oh, I am the king. You're right. I am Azor Ahai. I could do this. And that's what drives him. And it's the same thing like with Quentin. Quentin, you're not going to be Daenerys' king. You're not the hero of your story. Stannis, you're not the hero of your story either. And, of course, that downfall will come eventually, as we know, when he, makes some toasted marshmallows. It's not nice. Yeah. So.
Well, that's like succumbing to temptation. I couldn't say that for a second. But, yeah, no, it's, the temptress, that gets him.
It's Melisandre.
Yeah, exactly. It's quintessentially Melisandre.
Yeah, I mean, the iconic lady in red. I mean, amazing.
Like literally everything about her is red except for her
literally
skin.
The first sentence about her is her eyes are red, her hair is red, everything was red. We got it.
So we're getting close to the end here, but does anybody else have any thoughts or questions before we? No? Okay. Well, last thoughts from you guys.
Well, I had a question for Andrew. You went through and you talked about the cycle about learn, grow, blah, blah, blah. It sounds like you're turning the hero's journey into one giant OODA loop. Are you familiar with the OODA loop?
No, that sounds like something like from Willy Wonka.
Yeah, no, it's military doctrine. Like it's a decision-making process. It's observe, orient, act, or absorb, orient, decide, act, and you do that continually. And if you're faster than the other person at completing your OODA loop, you win.
Yes, and that's generally, now I'm going to use that word all the time. I hope that you gave me something.
There's a whole page on Wikipedia about it.
Oh my God, I'm going to go so deep in that rabbit hole. Oh man.
With charts.
But I mean, that's something that I see in characters and see in people, and I do see that. If you're able to adapt, overcome, integrate versus go through something and remove yourself from the world. And I think the characters we love, the characters we see in the story, the characters that are adapting, are overcoming, and literally prevailing are the people like Arya, are the people like Jon that are getting into the thick of it. They're integrating themselves in these systems. They're learning, they're growing, they're adapting, and they're doing it over and over again. Arya was doing it in King's Landing when she was first learning swordsmanship. She's doing it as a faceless man. She's going to do it when she comes back to Westeros.
I mean, she did it when she was, traveling with Yoren and then stuck at Harrenhal.
Exactly. So like those cycles keep going. You don't need to just have one mentor.
And Sansa is the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a transference of power. Like the story's not about the adults. It's not about Ned. It subverts that. It tells you no. It's not about Cersei. It's not about Ned. It's about these kids and what they're going to form the next world with.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like Robb being the oldest, and it's not at all about him either. You know what I mean? Like he's still like a kind of what we would like point out as like a child at the beginning, but like he's gone. You know what I mean? And he's actually it's like as soon as he's elevated to adult status is when he's gone. Like, you know, he's gone.
I would actually say there's a pattern that you can pick up on. People in A Song of Ice and Fire who react the fastest to problems are the ones that die.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pattern. And Rob was the first one to react to Ned. Ned was the first one to react to the problems at King's Landing. You know, like Renly was the first one to react trying to get the throne. He was faster than Stannis. I mean, the first reaction is the end move.
Yeah.
For them.
Yeah. And that's generally, in those situations, it's generally the ones that hold their chips back, and we see that prevail.
Like Walder Frey.
Exactly.
Tywin Lannister.
Exactly. Who made his moves at the last second. Shows up to King's Landing during Robert's Rebellion at the last moment.
I'm the conquering hero.
Yep. And because of that, you know, nobody knew who he was representing.
Right.
Nobody knew who he was coming there for. So
it's almost the opposite of game theory, where first turn advantage is...
Yeah.
You know, you act first, you win. Well, not in the Game of Thrones.
Yeah, no, not in the Game of Thrones. I think it's one of the 48 laws of power is to wait. Yeah.
All right. Anything else, guys? We good? Thank you all for coming. We'll be back here at 7 to talk about Game of Thrones season 8. I will say that I'm fairly certain that's going to be one of the panels that fills up, so I would get here early. Also, tomorrow we've got Fire and Blood Targaryen History at 4, and then at 10 o'clock, Looney Theories. That's another one where you absolutely have to get here early, like 9:30 for a 10 panel. It fills up. There's a lot.
Bring your crazy theories.
And if you guys
Please bring your crazy theories. We know the show is over, but we know that there are still theories out there.
Let books live on forever.
Thank you for listening to Tara Lynn's A Geek Saga podcast. If you like what you heard, please check out my website, ageeksaga.com, or consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/ageeksaga.